So, hey guys, welcome to episode 5 of the Fringe Shit Pod. I am one half of your host, Walter, aka the Gentle Giant, and with me is
The second half of the host, Sai, also known as the Octave Doctor, the Octave Doctor.
the Octavos Doctoros.
Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all those good things that we would like you to do.
And comment.
And comment your opinions, your comments, your matter, friendship, all friendship matters.
Free the Fringe.
Free the Fringe. And today's episode is about...
No, before that, I feel like episode 5, it's been 5 episodes. Maybe somebody started listening to us on episode 3, and now we're on episode 5, so he doesn't know who we are. So maybe a quick reintroduction. We're just two friends talking about fringe shit.
Yeah.
Always had an interest for fringe shit.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what fringe shit is stuff that's at the edge, at the border between
the sane and the insane.
Yeah. The natural and the supernatural.
Sure.
The physical and the non-physical. The mathematics of the fringe. The physics of the fringe.
Yeah.
The science, the fringe science that's at the border. So all those subjects, if you have any recommendations or subjects you'd like to hear our opinions on, or us to talk about, or people you'd like us to invite and talk about a certain subject, then comment below.
Yeah, I mean, we do enjoy new French shit, so please feed us the French.
Yeah.
All right. So this episode is about, I'm not really sure. It's something like Atlantis or some kind of pre-flood civilization. Something like that.
Yeah, I guess let's keep it general. Let's say this is a episode about if there were advanced civilizations before our modern civilizations, and our interpretation of history or the current paradigm in history, or what we believe. And what are some of the possibilities?
Yeah, I have a few things I want to say. A few things come to mind. Number one is that, it's really weird how we say this is what happened. Like, this is the history of planet Earth, as if we were there to see it. And it's not to say that, we have scientific methods to kind of find some kind of thread of history. But we also have to be careful not to jump to conclusions. Just because we haven't found something doesn't mean it didn't exist. That's the thing, right? Because let's say there was a civilization that lived 5 million years ago. I mean, I don't know. I'm just making up a number right now. Who's to say that? Let's say they wrote 10 million books. Every single one of those books would have dissolved by now. We wouldn't find them.
Yeah.
So I guess the point I'm trying to make is that we have this idea that somehow we know the history of the earth is in our hands. Meanwhile, things are completely lost to us, and we'll never know about them.
Mm-hmm. I get exactly what you mean. It's like we've made a story, and this story is the truth, but there isn't enough to make a story. And I wanna go on this thing that you're talking about, using the scientific method. Yes, historians find evidence which support a hypothesis or a theory that they have. right? But it's all based on induction. So it's not written in stone, if you understand what I mean. So it means the more evidence they find, the more different the story becomes, or the story can always evolve. So a historian can't actually ever tell you the definitive version of history. You understand? Like using his tools. And
Yeah.
so, for example, let's give maybe a physical example. I don't know. Do you have something to say real quick?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So, for example, let's say there is a place, a field, and then there was a farmer on the field, and then he was driving his tractor on the field, and then he hit some type of stone foundation, right? So he leaves it, and then he goes to whoever he has to go to, and archaeologists end up coming to examine this stone foundation. So now what do we have? We have a field, a stone foundation. We don't have anything else, right? So the first thing they'll tell you, like, okay, here there seems to have been maybe some type of human activity. So this is the first thing they conclude. Okay, so here we can say this is deduction, this is sound logic, because this thing didn't occur naturally. Now the next step is obviously they'll start clearing all these the soil and all of that, revealing the rest of the foundation and whatever was there, and in the process finding evidence. So maybe evidence would be like broken pottery, or it would be like I don't know, some type of leather or something that was used for horses, or it could be socks, shoes, you know what I mean? It could be a bunch of stuff that they end up finding. So then they'll start making a story. So, but they don't know exactly what happened. They will say, okay, from the leather goods we found, there were horses, there were this, there were that. But my point being is that they make a story. So they weren't there. They don't know, like, oh, who was there definitively. They can associate and be like, oh, we've seen this in other cultures, so we can say this belongs to that culture. So there's evidence. But there's also evidence that will never be found, that is not found, right?
Yeah.
That wasn't recorded, that wasn't left over. So whatever conclusion they come to, it can never be definitive, because every piece of evidence they find, their story will evolve.
It's kind of like when you look at like just to give like a more concrete example, you know, like you look at like Indian history, and it's like, okay, so the earliest writing we have in India, like in the sense of like writing that we understand, is like from the 3rd century BC, something like that. Okay, so then the Vedas, when we look like at the Rig Veda, all these Vedas, whatever, they're dated to like 1500 BC, you know, 12th century BC, 10th century BC, whatever, right? And it's like, okay, well, how do we know? How do we know they were written in the 15th century BC if we don't actually have any manuscripts? Or really, I mean, okay, we have like civilization, we can like find archaeological findings. Okay, there were civilizations here. But then how do you know, like, it's not that I'm saying like, oh, they're wrong, they weren't written in the 15th century BC. I'm just saying like, we have to be a little more humble and realize that, okay, we're making up stories here that have evidence that support them, but they're not like set in stone. I mean, we're kind of guessing, making arguments for, against, constantly changing our opinions, our ideas, you know?
Exactly.
Because we don't really have
also
the material that we need to really come up with the theory, you know, the final
It
story.
is impossible. It's impossible to, like you say, be with the theory. And that is the biggest problem plaguing archaeology, because people have sold stories that are set in stone, like the history of Egypt and the history of mankind and the Fertile Crescent and the dawn of civilization, and this story about how Americas and the interaction, the first people who got to the Americas and Bering Strait, like all these stories that people have come up with to make a unified kind of truth, let's say, that fits in with evolution, that fits in with, because that's the whole point, right? They try to make a model that's complete, right? And the problem is when there's evidence contrary to the status quo, this evidence either gets swept under a rug or it gets just ignored or made as unsubstantiated kind of a, even though there is as much evidence as they have for their claims in their theories.
Yeah, it's because, you know, it's hard to think differently. It's hard to kind of ignore. It's hard to build. It's easy to maintain, but to build a whole new paradigm requires a lot of work. And it also requires you to kind of let go of everything you've ever done your whole life, which is like, wow, you know, like, but anyway, I think the problem isn't that it's not like I'm trying to say like, or I'm sure you're also not trying to say this, that, oh, therefore science is a failure or history, we can't do history.
Of course not.
Yeah, we just have to be humble. And I think like,
exactly.
You know, like, I've been thinking of this recently, and it might sound like I'm kind of moving off topic, but I assure you I'm not. When we go to school, I think this is one of the biggest problems, right? When we go to school, we're taught, like when we go to physics class, we're taught that this is what an atom is. It's not like this is what we think an atom is so far. This is our current model of the atom, and our models of the atom are changing, you know?
And that's intellectual,
this is
like
the
you said.
atom. Yeah, go ahead.
Intellectual modesty, intellectual humbleness. If in the school it was already taught, as you say, this is the most representative model we have of an atom. This is what we posit out of the evidence could be possible, but we are unsure. The problem is certainty. In school, it's taught with certainty. Yeah. And you see it in people, like when you start speaking to them and then you tell them, hey, look, not a lot of things that you assume are certain are actually certain. Then most of the time their mouth falls to the floor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not just like physics, even like history. You're taught that this is what happened. Like this is what happened. You memorize it and write it in the exam because this is what happened, you know?
Exactly.
It's like, well, what they should, you know, what nobody ever tells you, like philosophy of science. Like, how do we know? Like, how do we know that the scientific method is accurate? How do we know that our current theories are, like, nobody actually teaches you the philosophy that kind of makes you question the certainty that we're being taught, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And so that's all a preface.
That's all a preface. So for history itself, so I just want to say, like, for example, there's been evidence of like human interaction, much, also human remains or human evidence of human presence, let's use this word, in North America, much earlier than most people think. So, like, this got swept under a rug, right? Because there's the classic story about the Bering Strait. And the problem is that the evidence, I think it's 13,000 years or something like that. And that was before the strait existed. So it doesn't fit into the model. You understand?
Yeah, just like Göbekli Tepe and...
yeah.
It's like, how do we make that fit into the model? Because it's supposed to be that at that time, humans were hunter-gatherers, like they still hadn't formed civilizations. And yet here they are building.
Exactly. And that's what I don't understand. I feel like societies are an innate part of human beings. I mean, just like how ants built militaries and colonies and stuff.
Yeah.
I feel like human beings just build societies. That's like kind of like the innate thing. And obviously those societies can be hunter-gatherers. I'm not saying that they have to be, how do you call it, agricultural or whatever. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with like, I mean, I don't know. It's just the whole story that we formed. It's a story. I mean, I don't know. It's the same thing with, I don't know if I want to go this far, but I might as well. It's Fringe Shit Pod, right?
It's the Fringe. Free the Fringe.
Free the Fringe, dude. All right. So it's the same thing with like evolution, right? How do we know like that? I mean, okay, so we found a few bones that show that, okay, whales have what appear to be like bones for legs. And it's like, okay, yeah, sure. I see that. But then it's like, okay, but how do we know the exact, like, okay, first it was this rat and then it became like, okay, that's a story and maybe there's some evidence that supports that, but to claim that it's a fact, I mean, it seems like
it's not a fact because you haven't observed it.
Exactly. I mean, it just seems like a lot.
Jump.
And not just to claim that it's a fact.
It's induction.
But to claim that it's a fact, to claim that it's purposeless, to claim that it was random. Like, I feel like there's so many, like, just, how do you know all this?
I do have to say, caveat, I do believe in adaptation.
No, me too. I mean, I don't.
But it's not. Yeah, I'm just saying. Like you two, obviously. I'm not saying you don't. I'm saying adaptation. Adaptation has been studied. Adaptation is real. No problem with that whatsoever. But a jump from one species to another has never, ever been documented.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with like life coming from non-life. It's like. Like I said,
conscious
right?
Coming from non-conscious.
Yeah, it's like, why don't we observe it in nature? Like, we don't see it happening ever.
Never, yeah.
Nobody has ever seen it happen. Nobody has ever been able to create it. But then it's like, well, but it must have happened.
Yeah.
Only if you assume that materialism is true. Sure, if you assume materialism is true, then it must have happened. But why are we making that assumption?
I don't know. But that's the thing. Like, I feel like science in general, like all of the science just need to take, so they just need to take the humble check. They need to have a humble check. Just be humble. Just live in uncertainty. That's what it is. And find the best means of explaining the uncertainty and say, no, we don't know. Like, it could be different. Oh, there is evidence here. Let's change. Like, why is it so hard? Why does the whole paradigm need to shift? Like, why do we need to have like a theory covering everything before we make the paradigm shift? Do you understand? Like, I feel like every time there is a paradigm shift, everything has to change.
Yeah.
Not just like, you know what I mean? Not just the specific field. Like, I don't understand this. And I understand, like, we as human beings, we want a unifying theory. We want something to anchor all of our beliefs, so we have some sanity and be like, oh yeah, the existence is real and whatever because of this and that. And maybe that's actually our problem. And why we're not finding out more. Why we reach like plateaus sometimes, and it takes so much time for us to actually get to the next step.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just about humility. It's about, like you said, it's just about, recognizing that our ideas are not final. They're finite. They're fallible. They're changing. They're all that stuff, It's not about denying the power of science or the power of any of that. It's just about just being humble and just being open to things like, and now we enter our topic, interdimensional communication.
What?
No.
That took a hard right.
Yeah, because here's the thing, right? Because I was reading this theory. Okay, now we're going to the fringe shit. Okay. Yeah. So there's this guy who was talking about how
wait, I just want to say, what was the other shirt idea? It was Free the Fringe and
Fringe and I don't remember, honestly.
Damn.
It'll come back to us.
It'll come back. It's recorded, thank God.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, I don't know. There's this idea that, like, that human beings, were put like, yeah. So these interdimensional beings came. Some people might.
Are you talking about the same ones that Alex Jones speaks of or spoke of?
Maybe, I don't know. Honestly, I have no idea what Alex Jones even saying anymore.
No, I haven't heard anything in a while, but I remember him speaking of some interdimensional vampires or something like that years ago. That shit was crazy.
Yeah, dude, that was intense. But no. There was this guy who was talking. He was talking about this idea that there's these interdimensional beings. They came here, and they gave us like some kind of knowledge, or they put us here. I'm not quite sure what it was, but it's something like. I've thought about this a little. Like, what if we really were like monkeys, like apes or whatever, and then these beings came from the sky, and we were like, what the fuck is going on? And they came to us, and they were like, they taught us how to like, do agriculture, and they made us smart, basically,
Yeah, have you ever heard of? Oh my God, it's so funny that we're speaking about this. You know why I laughed so hard? Because my brother and I were speaking about this. Are you talking about the Book of Enoch?
The Book of Enoch? I've heard of the Book of Enoch.
Have you heard of the Book of Enoch? And basically, the Book of Enoch is there's this guy on YouTube, I don't know, forbidden for knowledge, some crazy shit like that.
Oh my God! No, you're talking about the Emerald Tablets.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I know this guy, Carson, something like that.
Something like that. And anyways, he exactly because of him, I just made click because he was talking about that, like how actually human beings were really monkeys, and then these aliens came and they changed our DNA to have some smartness because they needed slaves and stuff like that. And those are basically the Anunnakis. And then,
yes,
I don't know if he said this, but from somewhere else, there is kind of a funny thing that like connects all of those civilizations that kind of have a similar story. And it's that the aliens all carry like a handbag. So in like Göbekli Tepe, there's a handbag, and in South America there are handbags, and in Egypt, in Mesopotamia there are handbags. So it's kind of crazy if you think about it.
Yeah,
like in that way.
The handbags are even in Göbekli Tepe, and that's definitely crazy. And I've seen that with Graham Hancock. He talks about that a lot.
Yeah, Graham Hancock is a real G.
The thing about that person you're talking about, and also the person that I was talking about, who is a friend of the person you're talking about. So you actually went in the exact direction I was about to go to, which is the idea that these Anunnaki came down here and taught us some stuff. And yeah, so the idea, yes, I remembered. You actually reminded me of that.
Yeah, for the gold, right? Because they wanted gold. And
yeah, that's like, I think, what's his name? Sitchin, something like that. Zechariah, I don't remember. Anyway, there's this guy
Zechariah Sitchin or something like that.
Yeah. So, but what I'm talking about is like, so they came and they wanted to. I don't remember exactly what he was saying, but he was saying something like they were having sex like with the woman, a human woman, creating like
and that's how
this breed. That's how what?
That's what they called Nephilim or something.
Yes, like exactly. And then they wanted to destroy the humans.
Mm-hmm.
And so they wanted to, but then this god, Ea, I think his name is.
Yeah, something like that.
From the story of Gilgamesh. If you read the story of Gilgamesh.
Yeah, from Gilgamesh.
Yeah, he's the guy that saves humanity.
Yeah.
From the flood.
Yeah.
So anyway, some god saved us from the flood, which brings us, I think, to the core of the whole thing, the flood story.
Yeah. Actually, that is the core of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like, if there was, because remember, if there was a civilization, that's our topic today. If there was a civilization, an advanced civilization before ours, then where is it? Yes. Why aren't we finding it?
Yes.
Why aren't we seeing these things? And you know, it's funny. I've also read about like cyclical Earth. I don't know. Have you ever heard of the crust displacement theory or something like that? Like that the Earth's crust gets loose from the mantle every, I don't know, 60,000 years or something like that, and
I know
every few years, and the poles shift. The polar shift. You've heard of the polar shift?
Yeah. I've heard of the Younger Dryas.
Yeah, but the Younger Dryas is not a polar shift event. Anyways, we'll get into something else. I was just saying, like, if a polar shift happens, and there's a theory that posits that about 6 polar shifts happen in the history of like Earth, all of civilization is destroyed. Like, there is no way something is left over.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like a mass extinction event, like crazier than an asteroid, if a polar shift occurs.
Yeah, and even like, if there was a flood, like maybe it's underwater. Like, we have no idea what's underwater, you know, like we know barely anything about what's underwater.
Exactly. So, but I was saying, like, if a polar shift occurs, like, imagine at Antarctica, where Antarctica is now, could have been where Africa is today. Wow. If a polar shift occurs the way the guy posits. Like, do you understand? Like, that whole continent could have been a livable continent. And today it's like a desert. Obviously, it's not a desert in like the way the Sahara is, but it's also classified as a desert.
It's like a snow desert.
A snow desert, yeah, but it is classified as a desert.
Yeah,
it's one of the biggest deserts.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, like, the thing is, like, when you look at a map, I've seen like those maps that Graham Hancock has. And by the way, to our listeners, I just want to make it clear that it's not like, you know, like we believe any one theory, you know. It's just like we're just throwing out ideas out there. Yeah,
we're talking about the ideas and their evidence for it. So
yeah,
like, the same way that these guys have evidence, and like we explained earlier in the pod, like how they come to conclusions, we're just positing that, hey, look, we can also come to other conclusions, like if we look at some other things.
Yeah, you can come to like more modest conclusions.
Exactly.
And of course you can come to less modest conclusions where it's like, you know, Anunnaki and, you know, whatever, stuff like that.
Fringe.
I'm not saying there's, you know, maybe it's true, who knows, but it's less modest. Yeah. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I saw some of the maps that Graham Hancock has, and if you look at it like what is now called the Arabian Gulf or the Persian Gulf, whatever you want to call it, was completely, there was no water there. It was all land.
Mm-hmm.
And Indonesia was connected to Asia. It was like literally one land. And it was like, there was so little space between Asia and Australia. I don't know if I can find this map. But the point is that like there was so much land prior to the Younger Dryas that just is is down under the earth now.
It's underwater.
Under the water,
so Yeah, exactly. So, for example of this land is like the pyramid of the coast in Japan, for example, right? That is something that would have been above land. during that period before the Younger Dryas. So basically, what happened was there was a massive ice age. So all of this polar water was frozen up and locked up in the ice caps. And for some reason, the Earth ended up in a warming period. And what happened was a lot of the water got released. Right?
Yeah.
And people also say it was a mass event in the sense that maybe it was accelerated by a meteorite or something like that, which caused this warming. So yeah, there's a lot of crazy evidence. So like if you look at the lines in the Sahara Desert, for example, some people like take the Sahara Desert and like look at the dunes, and it kind of looks like ripples, like even when you have a normal water like going down sand or something like that, you see that ripples form in the sand, right? And these ripples are like miles apart. And if you look at it, it looks like all of it's just washed away, right? It's actually crazy, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, so if we lost all that land, it's possible that, I guess the point that like Graham Hancock makes is that it's possible that these civilizations were living exactly there. That's where they were living. Which is why you have like Sumer just appear out of nowhere, speaking a language that has nothing to do with the area.
Yeah.
Because they're wherever they were living before the flood was submerged in water, and so they had to move further up north.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing with like Göbekli Tepe or even in India or because they're all like further down south, but all that land was gone, and so they had to go up north.
Yeah. And there is some hidden knowledge. I mean, like if you look at the Piri-Reis map, for example, this is a map where Antarctica is present and stuff, and Piri-Reis himself admitted to copying from other maps, right?
Yeah,
this is a map that Graham Hancock talks about as well.
Yeah, I saw that one. That's an interesting one.
That's a very interesting one. So, and he refers to earlier knowledge. So, like a lot of people say, like imagine the knowledge that was maybe in Alexandria, and the link is the following. Maybe we can get into the story of Atlantis. So, do you want to maybe?
Before I say any, okay. Let me say this because like we have a lot of, obviously Egypt had a lot of knowledge. Plato. Okay, now we're coming back to Plato. Plato was constantly talking about the knowledge of the Egyptians. Mm-hmm. And Egypt is obviously a very old civilization. Even if you don't believe that they're pre-flood or whatever, they're still an old civilization.
Mm-hmm.
And all their knowledge was pretty much just destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like we've lost all this history, documented history. So how can we be so sure, like, oh, well, there's no evidence. Yeah, well, it doesn't exist anymore. Like, what are we supposed to do? Like, this is why I'm talking about like humility. Like, evidence is destroyed, whether by naturally or artificially,
Yeah.
So Plato. In one of Plato's last ever writings, called the Timaeus and the Critias, I think those are the two, he mentions, and this is a funny thing for me, right? Because like when you talk about Atlantis, you think that this is just a conspiracy theory that people are talking about these days,
Mm-hmm.
But then you actually look into it and it turns out, wait a minute, our first mention of Atlantis, it's not some guy from the 70s who, was taking too much LSD.
Some guy believing that aliens came down to build.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's the father of Western philosophy,
Yeah.
That's the first guy that mentions Atlantis.
Yeah, it's actually crazy.
Yeah. And sure, you can say, well, it's not. It's just a story. He made it up. Whatever. I mean, it's not like I'm saying Plato said it, therefore it's true. I'm just saying, like, it's Plato who said it. You know.
Yeah, exactly.
And then he says in the story, he says a bunch of times, like, this is a true story. This is, like, Plato always says, like, this story may be true, this story may not be true. Or he might say something like, whether this story is true or not, only the gods know. You know, like, he would say stuff like that. This story, he doesn't say that. He says, this story is true. You know, he says it multiple times.
He testifies to the truthness of the story.
Yeah. So the idea is that this guy, Sauron, I think his name is, he goes to, like, Egypt, and he meets a priest there. And the priest tells him, listen, my friend, your people are young, very young. You don't know anything. You've only been through one catastrophe. You know, apparently, I guess the Egyptians have been through many catastrophes, which is possible. Like, you know, like, who knows how far back it extends, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so this guy, Sauron, I think his name is Sauron, if I'm recalling correctly, he tells him, well, before this catastrophe, you had a very large civilization. You just don't remember it. And there was this other large civilization called Atlantis. And there was a war between the Greeks and the Atlanteans, something like that. If I'm recalling the story correctly, I'm not sure. The point is that he mentions this Atlantis as a civilization that existed before the catastrophe, whatever that is. And that the Greeks also existed, and apparently the Egyptians also existed.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, like, so civilization, here's what's weird, right? Civilization begins, what, 4000 BC, something like that?
Well, that's what they posit, yeah.
Yeah. How suddenly we have, out of nowhere, just independently, we have Egyptians, Sumerians, Akkadians, Greeks, Indians, like, all these separate languages. Where did they all come from? In such a short time frame. Like, you would think that first one language would develop, and then maybe after 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years, another language will, like, you wouldn't expect,
you don't
different humans suddenly just all forming civilizations at the same time.
Yeah, but that's also the thing, like, it's because there is a lack of evidence of written language. So a lot of them say, oh, because there's no written language, so there's no evidence or history thereof. So for them, that's like an indicator. But you could have been an agricultural society that had no written language. There's no problem with that whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, because I talked about India before, and we said that before 3rd century BC, there's no Indian writing. And yet they have, like, books and they have grammar.
Yeah,
and
because they say that the Veda is orally transmitted as well, right?
Yeah, even the most conservative modern historians will be like, yeah, this is from the 15th century BC or something like that, 2000 BC.
Yeah.
The point is, it's like, for more than 1,000 years, they transmitted these things by memory.
Yeah.
And if you really think about it, it's like, why would we write it? You know, like, it costs so much money to write it.
Yeah, especially then and stuff, because they have a cheap way of doing it. Yeah,
who are we going to write it for? And it's going to get destroyed anyway. Like, let's just... Yeah. And then anybody can read it.
That was what it was. So, like, information was I mean, the valuable whatever. So whatever the unifying theory of the time was, the most valuable information, I guess that's what was always maybe written down, and the rest was like, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, who's to say that there was a time when maybe people didn't care about writing? Maybe they did know about it, but they just felt like we don't want to write down our knowledge. We want to pass it on.
Not worth it.
Yeah. Like poetically.
And there are still,
yeah.
There are a lot of languages that, because of Western civilizations, they've got a written form. So a romanized letter set to, represent the words and stuff like that. So it's kind of crazy when you think about it. Like, yeah, there are societies where written language played no role. So does that serve against evidence for them? So if we found now people and we found an encampment, or we found some type of foundation and people there and some forms of life, do we automatically assume that they weren't advanced because they didn't write? Or like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
What are the implications?
Yeah, I mean, I've been. It's just like when you look at their knowledge of the stars. They had like good knowledge of the stars. Like they could create calendars. They could create. Like it takes thousands of years. Yeah, it takes thousands of years of observation.
Yeah.
To really know that, okay, this star is here at this time. At that, like it takes really a long time to really know what's happening in the sky, and when it's happening, and what patterns there are. Like patterns, you can't figure out the patterns of the sky in one day.
No,
you can now with like astrology software, astronomy software, or whatever. Yeah. Not back then.
Yeah, I was saying the Arabs, they used to use poetry to transmit like ways and how to follow the stars and stuff like that. So that's pretty crazy as well. And you see, that's non written information transmission. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
that's how people would notice stuff. Yeah. So that's, I mean, like you said, Egypt, the Greek, and there used to be other civilizations as well. Like we cannot say. That's why I mentioned that with the polar shift, for example. Like if 6 polar shifts happened in the history of the Earth, there could have been human beings like as advanced as us, maybe even more advanced than us. And they could have been wiped off the face of the Earth and we would have not noticed anything. Like I said, if a polar shift occurs, it's game over for whatever is on the planet.
Like, yeah, and like I've actually I just remembered something that person said, whose name completely eludes me. I forgot his name. But yeah, he said like something like, okay, one of the reasons we don't have any technologies left over from them is because they didn't value technology the way we value technology. They valued spiritual technology. They valued spiritual attainment more than they valued material attainment.
I co-sign.
So if they valued spiritual over the material, then maybe they didn't develop. It's like if you look at like Chinese and Indian civilizations, they were pretty advanced civilizations. They were just like very, very focused on spirituality.
Yeah, that's true.
Like they have all these meditation and like very complex phenomenologies, but they didn't seem to care as much about.
If you look at South American civilization as well, like, you know that actually most of the Amazon is non-fertile land. Like, basically, in the Amazon to grow stuff, you need a special type of soil. And I mean, they developed that, you know what I mean? It's crazy. Like, they knew, okay, we had to get this, burn this type of stuff, mix it together with this soil, and we have it. They call it terra preta or something like that. I think Graham Hancock speaks about it as well. And these are also advanced technologies, but it's using nature to fulfill a certain requirement that you have. We go against the natural thing. We say, okay, how do I, as efficiently as possible, do this? Sometimes it's not really about efficiency. Sometimes it's just about, how do I do this for the maximum return, minimum effort. You know what I mean? Like, and as well, good for the environment. Yeah, without harming. Yeah.
How do I co-create? I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, what was I gonna say? All right, because how did they discover ayahuasca? You know.
Yeah.
Like you have to like figure out that this root, if you mix it with this thing, I forgot what it's called. This thing, that inhibitor.
Yeah.
How do you figure that out?
How do you figure that out so that your liver doesn't digest it, whatever, before it hits your bloodstream correctly? That's actually like crazy. It's chemistry. Yeah. I mean, the ancient Egyptians had. Yeah. So let's get back to this knowledge that the ancient Egyptians had, and that Plato, in his visit to them, acquired. Right. So he went there, he learned, and he said, like you said, that this is truth. He validated the fact. He co-signed that bitch. He was like, yo,
yeah,
this is the truth.
Yeah.
No, don't let anybody tell you anything else. This is the truth.
This is the truth.
And a lot of people say that also, like the descendants of Atlantis. So there's one guy I've been watching lately. I don't remember his YouTube channel and stuff, but he has a pretty nice, I really like his version of Atlantis, or at least his using, obviously he has evidence for it, right? So his evidence is the flood, obviously, that the water is clear, that there was a flood in the Sahara Desert. And there's a place called the Eye of Sahara. So it's called the Rishat structure, and it's called the Eye of the Sahara. You can actually see it from space, and it's 3 rings, so it fits exactly with Plato's description. And if there was water there,
yeah, I saw
it
that.
actually exactly fits with Plato's description of.
Yeah, I saw that one. I saw that one. It's somewhere like in Morocco or something like that, right?
Yeah, it's in the Sahara Desert, like some Morocco.
Yeah, I saw that one.
And they used to interact with the Egyptians, right? And there's a whole theory about, like, I don't know, Graham Hancock, obviously, that all this, there were people traveling around the world, like showing and teaching the people what knowledge they had left over from before whatever this cataclysm was. And that's why when you go to all of these Polynesian cultures, when you go back to South America, when you go back to the underwater pyramids in Japan, to the pyramids in Egypt, to the pyramids in South America, to the pyramids all over the world in Asia and everywhere else, you see that there is a knowledge, a masonry, or a knowledge of astronomy, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
That takes thousands of years of observation, and this knowledge was kept and shared.
Yeah, and
somehow.
And that's the thing, right? Because this idea of a flood, how are these independent cultures, why are they all coming up with the same story?
Mm-hmm. And why are they tracking the same things? Why are they all like building these structures to track astronomy?
Yeah, you'd think like
out of nowhere, like
like the possibilities of what humans can do. It's pretty big. Like you can do a lot of things. Like why did they all decide to do that?
Yeah, exactly. And so similarly, it's creepy.
It is creepy, and you can even like completely doubt it. You can be the most skeptical person in the world. You still have to be like, this is quite the coincidence. They're all talking about a flood. They're all building the same structures.
Yeah.
There's something's weird here.
Something is really weird. And that's what I really like. Like the Egyptians, the way they described Atlantis to Plato, because that's where he learned it from. He learned it from the Egyptians. They told him like, hey, all our knowledge, like all of this that you see here, we actually have from them. Like they're also our forefathers, I think. That's how he described the knowledge. Like,
yeah, he's never like
they knew a lot of stuff. Yeah,
he's never like I'm coming up with all this stuff. It's like, no, I heard.
Yeah, I heard exactly.
Yeah.
I heard.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, it's a high possibility. Like maybe advanced doesn't mean like a computer screen and this and whatever, but maybe advanced means, oh, I can store information in crystals, or I can store sound in pots, or I can. There's a lot of crazy stuff that you can do, like analog machines that actually work more with nature, analogous things. You know what I mean? Not like we have everything digital, right?
It could also be advanced just spiritually. They were like
spiritually,
yeah, they were just spiritual beings. I don't know, like they were more spiritual than we are. They were more connected to the spiritual world, whatever that means, you know.
Yeah.
Because you know, like I don't know if you believe in astrology or not, but obviously the ancients did. Whether you do it or
astrology, not. Like Taurus, Gemini, not astronomy, like
no.
Okay.
Yeah, like see, the thing is, like when you actually read about astrology, like modern astrology is very empty compared to what they were doing. You know, like the astrology that the ancients believed in was like very complex. Like there was no there wasn't this idea of, oh, you know, you're a Taurus, because that's not true, you know, because like when you're born, there's a lot of stuff going on in the sky, a lot more than your sun sign. But anyway, that's a whole different story. The point I'm trying to make is that when you look at the astrology and you see the complexity, like it's such a complex system.
Yeah, I know. I've seen some guys on YouTube, some guy, he's so funny, doing like this type of astrology, mixing like Chinese astrology. It has its own flavor.
Yeah.
With like I don't know, is it Greek astrology or what would you call it?
Yeah,
there's
also
sure. Like
Western
Arab astrology. There's Western astrology. And it's crazy, like, oh, he says, yeah, if you're born in the year of the pig and somebody's born in the year of the snake, you guys are incompatible because the snake is the enemy of the pig, and like crazy shit like that, you know what I mean? Like deeper than that, obviously, and or like, oh, the bull is this and finance and it means this, and like, bro, some people trade like crypto and markets on astrology. Like,
yeah, there's this quote I saw.
It, like somebody believes it enough, he has enough conviction to bet money on it. Like,
there's this quote I saw.
Did you get that?
Yeah, I think it's like JP Morgan or something. Someone like really big, who was like, millionaires don't do astrology, billionaires do, something like that. But anyways, the point I was trying to make is that
because they're in tune with the devil, with the shaitan.
the point
the billionaires know how to hack reality.
Exactly. But the point I was trying to make is that whether it's true or not, it's very complicated. You have to really understand the motion of the stars, the motion of the planets, the motion of and you have to like observe over a large amount of time in order to know. Like, you can't just be like, okay, well, Venus represents love, and you know, whenever Venus is here, this is going to happen. Like, you're not just going to figure that out in one day. You have to see Venus go through that year after year, and then you're like, okay, every year Venus is here, this is happening, you know.
Yeah. But except when the moon is red and Venus is here, this happens.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like to that extent, like there's really like, yeah. Or so when Venus and Mercury are at the same time here, something else happens. Like, you need to know every single detail of.
Exactly.
Yeah. There's a lot.
So it's like, how did they come up with this complex system? Like, it takes a lot of time and observation, and we have no records of them.
I mean, I feel like it has little to do with astrology. Like, this is my opinion on it. It has little to do with astrology, but it has to do more with like how the world is built. And you know how we've always been like, oh, the world is a fractal. Like, reality is a fractal. Like, even reality, an atom is a fractal. You go from an atom, you go to a quark, you go to a string, you always keep going. It doesn't end. You know how you can have infinities between like 0 and 1. Like, it's crazy. You can have infinity between 0 and 1. You don't even need to go to infinity. You don't need to go higher than 1, like, to have an infinity. And those things are fractals, right? So it's, for me, it's always been this. The planets are actually a timekeeping instrument, if you think about it, right?
Yeah.
So you have Venus, you have Mercury, they have a orbit, they have a stable orbit. The world, the Earth's always been 365 years going around. But what is also happening is that the world we live in, or this construct, is a fractal. So if you have time, you're going through patterns. You're going through patterns. You're going through patterns. So they've actually mapped time and patterns in the fractal. What is happening at this time? What is happening when this time happens? So I don't believe it in that sense, that is astrology or some woo is happening, but actually they've just been keeping time and observing the fractal and the patterns of the fractal and saying, hey, when it's this time, so time being Mercury is here and Saturn is here and the moon is here, this happens in the fractal. There's more love, like on the spiritual realm somehow. You know what I mean? Like, there's things that they've observed. So that's always been my theory in it. Like, there is something to it. It's undeniable.
That's
but,
I think,
yeah, but that's
I mean,
my two piece.
We'll probably have to like do a whole episode about astrology. That's a whole different
that's
kind
true.
of world.
That's actually not even the topic.
I will say that I guess the point I was trying to make, and I do agree with you actually, what you're saying I think is true. And I do think like time is qualitative, because we think like everything is quantity, because that's the modern viewpoint, like everything is just quantity. But actually there's a quality to time, you know.
Yeah.
Like, time isn't just like this quantity, like every time has a different feel to it. But anyway, that's
exactly. You can be in the time of it, but it's the same thing, like since you were born. Like, don't you notice like there are certain times in your life where things are just different, like maybe 2 years of something, or 7 years of this and 3 years of that, and like
it just feels like
it's a fractal, and
I agree.
It's repeating somehow. You get what I mean?
I do agree. And okay, so but I guess the point I was trying to make is that when you actually read the books that were written, the Western astrology books, the oldest books that we have, you know, like Ptolemy and whatever these guys, you read it and you feel like they themselves have no idea what they're talking about. You know, like they've been given this system and they're like, how the hell does this work? You know, like they're trying to make sense of it. It doesn't feel like they made it up. It feels like they're trying to make sense of something they received.
Exactly. Yeah. But without enough context, because there wasn't enough time.
Yeah. Just like how they say, like the Egyptians, they're trying to, like when you see the pyramids, they're actually getting worse with time. Like, the best pyramids were at the beginning, and then suddenly it's just it's almost as if they forgot how to build pyramids.
They lost the knowledge.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah.
But
but that's how it is. That's the way the cookie crumbles.
That's the way the cookie crumbles.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like and like I said, polar shifts. I don't know. Like you guys need to look into this. You need to look into this. Like Like I said, we could have had even more. Atlantis is just something that at least there is some evidence. But as I said, if a polar shift occurs, we're talking about like 200-kilometer tall waves, continents shifting from place to place, like Africa just becoming North Pole, Antarctica becoming like, it's basically the surface of the earth dislocates from the ground of the earth, and it just becomes like a free shifting plate, and the magnetic field like has to settle again and determine where the North Pole is before the earth locks up again. So like everything gets destroyed, and this happened apparently more than once. So if this is true, obviously there's no evidence, it's just induction, but that's science. If this is true, there could have been civilizations even more advanced than Atlantis, like
Atlantis could be like just what we remember, you know,
what we remember, exactly what we still have. Maybe something else happened and Atlantis like built up from already losing a bunch of stuff, like, you know.
I mean, if like someone like what's his name, I forgot his name, Robert Duvall, I think his name's something like that. If he's right that the Sphinx originally had a lion's head and pointed at Leo, the star, the constellation of Leo, then that would make like the Sphinx like I think it's like 25,000 years old, something like that. So
that's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, did you see that guy Robert Schoch?
Yeah, I love him. Oh, I love them all. Randall Carlson.
Yeah, dude.
Robert Schoch.
Robert Schoch is like a serious geologist, and he's like, look, there's this weathering pattern.
Yeah, but they're making fun of him, and it's based on facts, bro. What do you want?
Yeah, you don't have to believe him. You can disagree with him.
You don't have to. You don't have to. And even, there's like crazy evidence. You know how this is one of the craziest ones that's being buried. Like, do you know how the pyramids, basically, there's evidence that the pyramids are actually poured concrete.
What?
Yeah, that people knew how to make poured concrete. Like all of this that we're talking about, like, oh, they were sliding ramps of limestone. No, they found a mix on how to make the limestone out of poured. And what's the evidence? When you look at the block of the stone,
it's too perfect.
Not just that, all of the magnetic, like you can see, basically there's like small traces of iron and metals in it, right?
Yeah.
And they settle to the magnetic pole because they're in a liquid. Do you understand? So when you see all of them lining up to a magnetic pole, you can say, okay, this was a liquid. Because when it happens in rock, it doesn't settle all of them straight. Like some of them settle here, some of them settle there. That's how it just happens naturally. So this is one piece of evidence saying that, hey, this could have been concrete. This is something that was liquid at one point. This is the first piece of evidence. It could have also been melted, huh? Just saying. It's just, it had to have been liquid at some point. That's the main point.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting.
And then, yeah, very interesting. And then the banger is you can use that to date the stone, because what happens is when it's liquid, you have the exact point of the magnetic pull, and we know the shift of the magnetic pull. So I don't remember the dates exactly, but it's a whole bunch of evidence showing that, hey, this thing was built much differently than what we're thinking about. And they had a bunch of knowledge that we are not thinking. And concrete, I mean, how complicated is concrete? Like, do you know that the Romans had better quality concrete than we have today?
Really?
Yeah. Why do you think Roman things are still standing?
Yeah.
Their secret was use salt water. They added salt water to the concrete.
They weren't as cheap.
The Roman structure. Yeah, I don't know if they weren't as cheap. And obviously they had a special type of stuff, also the settling technique and stuff. But it's actually crazy. They had, so how old is the Roman Empire? 2,000 years ago? A bit more, 300 something BC. Anyways, the Roman Empire had more advanced concrete about 2,000 years or more ago than we have today. Let that sink in.
Yeah. You really have to think about like these Egyptians, if they really are, I mean, they're poor. I mean, just like living conditions, obviously at that time were not, they didn't have air conditioning
But what are we even talking? Living conditions in Europe just like 200-300 years ago, people were living on less than $1 a day, bro. Like,
yeah,
poverty was everywhere. And on top of it, the Egyptians, that's another thing. Like, there is evidence of slavery, obviously, but slavery in context, huh? Slavery was different too. Like, there is even evidence of the workers having quarters, having a good diet, having all of these things, like being taken care of, not slaves like how the transatlantic slave trade was.
Yeah.
There is evidence of that, and that's like it was more like funny thing.
It was more like work.
It was work.
Obviously, it was still slavery. I'm not trying to say, but it was more like, you don't have money, so just come here and do the work,
Yeah. And there was some decency in your life. There's not like you were, whipped.
Yeah.
And stuff like that, thrown away. So like this image that we have Like there's a lot of evidence speaking against it. And this Egyptian things, like I said, Robert Chuck, you said, there's so many water lines. He did the research. He has the evidence. The Egyptologists just do not accept it whatsoever. Or even this with it being liquid, did not accept it. Just stick with the story. Slaves, rocks, slaves and rocks.
What I was going to say about what you said about the liquid is that it's really hard to imagine that these people who are, their living conditions are not optimal, I guess you could say, just would go all this distance to carry like these really heavy rocks. Like it just seems like such a waste of time when you could be doing something that would actually bring you food and like shelter, something that would actually serve your needs, because you're living in a time where people who still like need it, they didn't have like water being flown in from an airplane or whatever,
no.
And so like the idea that they would go all that way just to carry these rocks, it would make more sense that they would make it liquid. They would just like create it in that spot,
Yeah, it makes more sense. Why does early man have to be dumb?
Yeah.
This is the problem with science. Everybody just wants early man to be dumb. This is the problem. They say, oh, no, concrete. Are you crazy? They didn't even know how to wipe their ass with sticks. There were sticks, there were leaves. You could have used that. No, they used rocks. That's how stupid they were. Like, this is, you know what I mean? Like, why? Because I've always said this. I don't want it to sound, I don't want to be like, oh, it's a soundbite. It's just because they weren't white. Honestly, it cannot be anything else. You cannot tell me anything. Only what, oh yes, enlightenment. Oh yes, we are so small. Oh yes, those people. Oh yes. Why do you not want to give credit to them? Why? Like, even Mesopotamia, it was the cradle of civilization, but they were stupid. They weren't like us, so they were dumb. But they started. At least they could write. At least they knew how to write.
I mean, really, let's be honest. Like, it wasn't until like 100 years ago, even less, that, I mean, let's take India as an example, right? The idea was that India, so they discovered about 300 years ago, they discovered that the Sanskrit language has a lot of similarities with Greek and Latin. I was like, okay, well, so one of them had to be derived from the other. So they came up with this idea that they call it the Aryan invasion, that these Aryan people went into India and they conquered them and they gave them their language and their gods and all that. And then these same Aryan people are the people that became Greek and Latin and all that stuff.
Okay, I thought it was the other way around. I thought it was the Indians who became Aryan.
So that's the thing. That's the point, right? The point is that the Indians now are like, you know what? We are the Aryans. It's not that the Aryans came in and conquered us. We are the Aryan. We are the people who spread this language. Like, like the point is that that now Indians are starting to say, like, like you're being racist, Like the whole point is that you don't want to admit that we could be the one. Like at that time, they didn't want to admit that these barbarians gave us our language. No way, like
these Chabati ass eaters.
And so the evidence has been piling up that this Aryan invasion just couldn't have happened. So now they changed it to Aryan migration, because like, okay, there's no evidence for an invasion, but there must have been a migration. Yeah. And obviously there's a lot of debate. I'm not here to like talk about the debate. I'm just saying, like, this idea of the Aryans, I mean, we all know where it led, right? When we hear the word Aryan, we don't think Indian. We think, obviously, the man with the mustache,
The man with the mustache.
Yeah. So this idea of the Aryan people, the true people, like, we all know where that led, right? Like the most most racist event of the 20th century, of human history, maybe,
Yeah.
Many millions were killed.
Yeah, for sure.
And so this is only less than 100 years ago.
Yeah.
already people.
And imagine if they had the facts straight and we told them, oh, it was an Indian race. Like, what would they have grouped themselves upon? Like, at least you would have taken away one weapon. You know what I mean? And just because, no, like, oh, this is fact, we are superior. It's just like a superiorist colonial. I know I sound like a lefty, but it's not. No, I'm not. You know, like me, I'm not really like liberal, and I'm liberal, but I'm also not like liberal in that sense. But like, this is just evident. Like, we don't even need, like, there's so many examples in Africa, in the Middle East, in Egypt, in North Africa, in Asia, in Australia, wherever, of just disregarding people's history because you just have to make your own version of the story.
It comes down to to me, it comes down to this: being advanced equals having computers, right? If they're spiritually advanced, that's just an illusion because consciousness doesn't even exist. Right? So if you're a materialist, then there's no such thing as being spiritually advanced.
Yeah.
And so, you know, like any idea that there's a different kind of advanced civilization that cared about quality of being rather than, creating like material things.
Yeah.
Even the idea that there could have been such a civilization doesn't occur to them because it's like, to them, being advanced just means, you know, having like atomic bombs and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's actually crazy. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of crazy evidence. Also, did you watch that Graham Hancock on Netflix thing? Did you see about that city, the other city, the underground city?
Where?
There was a Netflix documentary.
No, I didn't watch the Netflix documentary, but where is the underground city?
It's also in Turkey.
Oh, okay.
And it's a city built, I don't know how many stories deep into the ground, like at least 5-6 stories down.
I haven't seen this.
Okay, it's called Derinkuyu.
Hmm?
So, Derinkuyu, it's an underground city. So this city called Derinkuyu, or also known as Elengubu, extending to a depth of approximately 85 meters. So it's 85 meters deep.
Wow.
In the ground.
Wow.
And yeah, it could hold up to 20,000 people. And there is no definitive date. Some people, they date it to like 780 AD, but it could have been much earlier. Like, there's no definitive date on it. So it's actually crazy. A crazy city, yeah. And there was livestock and everything, a way to close it down and everything. So yeah, and some farmer just randomly like found it, rediscovered it.
Yeah,
so
you know,
lost.
Like, that's the thing about like dating. When they date things, and they don't really know when the dating is.
Yeah, because you can't date rock. That's the big problem. And
yeah, but then what they do is they say, well, it couldn't have been earlier than this time, so therefore it must have been somewhere around here. You know, like they would assume their own model.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And then they would fit it into the model, you know?
Yeah. So that could have been a city too. And so they say it might have been like 8th, 7th century BC or maybe even sooner.
I mean, that's really insane. I need to watch this. Which episode is it?
Yeah, you need to watch the whole documentary on Netflix.
I don't know why people said it wasn't good.
Who?
It's like, I guess the people who, you know, I shouldn't be listening to.
Yeah. To get into the Fringe, bro.
Okay, I'll watch
Don't you remember? Actually, low-key, Graham Hancock was our introduction into the Fringe, if you think.
Yeah, I mean, I read many of his books. I love the guy. I don't know why I didn't have faith.
Yeah, no, it was pretty good. It was pretty good. Obviously, Randall Carlson wasn't as present and stuff like.
I love Randall Carlson.
Yeah,
and
I say he wasn't as present, but Robert Koch was also in it. Yeah, so I would definitely check it out to our audience too. Yeah, check it out.
Yeah, I will. I'll definitely do that.
And on that note,
yeah.
I would say we can wrap it up here. If you enjoyed it, if you enjoyed the pod, or do you have something else to say?
No, I'm good.
Okay, well, if you
Yeah, I mean,
enjoyed the
there's
pod,
still. I feel like there's still so much more to say. I'm just like I'm tired.
yeah, me too. I was thinking about looking at the time. I was like, yeah, but for another time. So if you have suggestions for an episode, the next episode we should do, fight it out in the comments between you. The one with the most likes gets done. Obviously, I'm talking to my non-existent crowd, but maybe one day.
Who knows? Who knows what episode will be the one that blows up? You know.
Yeah, you never know. Maybe this. I think we have some nice shorts in here. Anyways, so yeah, subscribe, comment, like, keep us motivated, support us.
Yeah.
Share it with friends, family, other people that you want to introduce into the Fringe. I feel like this is a good episode to get introduced into some Fringe ideas as well.
Yeah. All right.
And yeah, from one half of your host, I wish you a good week.